Good morning, everyone. So in this video, we're going to talk about my OCHO list. We're only going to talk about my list because I want to talk about the theory behind why I did what I did and the changes I made for my social distancing list, which you can see on the screen. Um, I'll do list reviews when the lists are out. They were due last night. We'll release them. I don't have them. Jeremy has them. We'll release them later on today. OCHO is an 8-man team event on Universal Battle. We have 30 teams currently, so 240 people. So that'll be exciting. Hopefully, running it is not too bad as far as like the clicking the stuff. Getting people signed up is probably the most annoying thing. But then it's always rules questions and debates. But whatever. That's future Alex's problem. Right now, I had to submit a list. It was very difficult for me to do. I had a lot of ideas and a lot of back and forth with people I know. So let's start with social distancing. Um, my build that I took. So this is the list I took social distancing. I got 85 of 120, so it wasn't too bad. I was like ninth, though individual scores or whatever, because it's all about what you do for your team. And I had a mix of getting what I'll say easier matchups for me, and I had a mix of ones where you have to take something because the team doesn't want to play against it. Um, it was a weird, we had a weird team composition, so we won't go into that too much. But as far as the list, let's just go down. So, Exalted Herald, he's always been pretty solid. Sometimes maybe I don't give him enough credit. It's almost like when I don't have him, I he just adds a cool like element in the sense that he can adapt to each game individually. Some games he's taking Veil Walker and trying to bomb things with grave calls. Some games he's taking one last game versus Orcs he took like stomps and what did he take? He took stomps and strength 6 and just like walked into stubborn and just walk in front of units and be like, all right, try to kill him. I'm gonna hold up and I'm gonna try to heal with my spells. So he's a great piece. I think the weirdest thing when we talk about the Ocho list, you'll hear me talk about is you know he has 3 spells. He's only an adept. They're if you don't take Veil Walker, his spells are still good. But then what do you take with him magic wise? To make your magic good enough to you know where do you draw the line of I want a really good magic phase, but I don't want to pay too much in magic? Well, that's more list design, so that's list theory. So we'll talk about it later. So then I took a dragon guy. So paired weapons, Hero's Hearts, Binding Scroll, Obsidian Rock, Dragon. So basic dragon guy, with the MR2. I happen to have a Binding Scroll on mine, and then the Hero's Heart to give him 4 strength 5. I hated this guy. I mean, I could go on about he just was garbage. I think. I mean, if you I guess if you played against me, you'll know he didn't do that like horribly. He wasn't like it just felt bad playing him. That's kind of what I want to say because he died a lot. He got like fucking rammed. He just got fucked up a lot. And he's 965 points when he dies. He has to be your general, which is the worst part. If he didn't have to be the general, I'd like him a lot more. But he has to be your general, so you got to worry about his range for dogs. Um, he just dies, so he's worth an extra 200 points. Like one thing, like he dies a lot. Like he died half. He lived. He he lived 2 games, I think. It felt bad. Yeah, he died a lot. Barbarian Chief. It's a cool little cute thing, and it's probably a mix of me using him poorly slash the matchups he was in. He just happened to be like targeted first and like blown up a lot. I didn't love him. Um, I was kind of against that guy. I didn't like my 2 heroes. I like the Herald. Core. I mean, this is a basic 3 scoring 2 chaff core, and I'll change it in my next list. You'll see, but it's like it's 903 of 900. It kind of feels bad because it's so slow and the barbs are kind of useless, basically useless, besides maybe being a sacrificial unit slash a scoring unit that just kind of hangs there. Um, Dogs, of course. 4 Feldrakes, I didn't like this unit that much. Um, so I like 3 with paired weapons. I mean, it's 65 points cheaper. And I feel like it does similar stuff. I mean, this unit had some good moments, but it's also worth like a lot of points too. Two Lust Chariots, they were fine. Lust, I did flee a little bit. I didn't flee as much as maybe I would have, but I mean, I think there's like a mindset in being able to flee for both sides of the board, right? I probably took some longer charges than I needed to. Not needed to. I probably took some riskier charges knowing I could flee my chariot if I fail. And at the same time, I'm sure some opponents didn't charge my chariots knowing I could flee from their charge. So it's one of those things where even if you go through the whole game and you never flee with it, or like you can go through this whole tournament and only flee once and then say, well, why did you take it? You didn't flee at all. It's the moments of like, how many charges have you not made because the enemy could flee? That's kind of how Lust Chariots feel. And also terrain. Um, there's so much terrain, even though the new maps basically took a wall away from everything, where just I didn't take random wounds from like charging into runes or going over a wall, and it's only a 5 wound model with for 345 points. Like every wound is worth a lot of points. You want to go over a wall and take 2 wounds and be like, oh, there's half. You know what I mean? And then an Elder who's just an Elder. So overall, it's a solid list. I didn't like if you wanted to kind of, and I do it in my next list, even though my next list actually evolved a little bit deeper than maybe the basic changes I'm talking about now. But like this, I think is kind of garbage, and it's 1100, and then this probably has points to come out of it, like 165 points. So you're probably looking at like 1250 points you can play with. You're gonna have to put some magic back in some extent, but like if I could have modified this list and kept the core of it, kept like, you know, I still want a dragon, which is fine. I don't love it, but if you still wanted the dragon, I'd actually drop this guy, so 335, and this was 165, I think I said, because it's 365 for the unit. Yeah. So it's 335 plus 165 is 500 points. So I would get another Elder. And I had 2 points left. I would do this. If I was going to copy my own list and like try to make it slightly better, at least in my head better. It's not necessarily, I'm not saying that like this is the perfect change. I would take this out. I don't think you need that. And then I said 500 points, so I had 45 points left after this. 47 points left. Sorry, we're real time changing things. With 47 points, you can't add anything here, can't add anything here. I mean, you can add command here if you wanted. I'd probably consider going one greed, and it would be, you actually save 5 points, so you'd have 50 points left. I maybe musicians here, or try to upgrade this to a musician. I don't know. For 50 points, you still can't even get what I would want. Yeah. I mean, less warrior units were fine. You don't flee that much with them, to be honest. I really think you can get away with like 10 warriors without lust, even without champ. If you wanted, though, champ is really nice because it's 30 points for an extra wound and extra leadership, and you can challenge off characters, which is really nice because it basically guarantees like a turn of steadfast. So if the enemy has last turn and you're sitting on the objective and they charge you with the scourge, you can just challenge and have a rerollable 8 for the steadfast. So there are benefits like to having a champion. Obviously, I don't know what I would do with the 50 points, to be completely honest with you. When I see something like 50 points, sometimes I go like randomly roundabout to like change the list maybe more than I should. I guess you could give this a champ if you wanted. I'd probably give some musicians and stuff. So that's like how I would change it if I kept this general list. But you'll see, which we'll now talk about, the OCHO list. I did not. I kept some of the themes and then I changed it. So this is the list that I submitted for the OCHO. So let's go top to bottom, and I'll tell you why I chose things, and I'll tell you how I feel. So I went through a lot of iterations of lists. I had ideas with Helmals and non-Helmals, and double heralds was a list I almost submitted. Um, I think with warriors in general, in the last couple months, what I've learned is, not months, just the last year of playing warriors, is there's a lot of good units in the book. There's some core concepts I think you need to that every army sticks to, but the warrior ones being you need some scoring, you need some chaff, you need solid magic, and that's pretty much, and then some monsters and stuff to kill things, right? But past that, it's just a bunch of different tools that it takes the player to use it. You know, it's all about its player. I mean, the player skill is what defines this game, Warhammer in general. I've watched enough OCHO games or social distancing games and CoronaCon games and all this crap where at the end of the day, it's just good players win games. And sometimes they're closer, or sometimes they lose, or sometimes they make mistakes. But for the most part, this whole UB dice crap, you see a lot of the same good players winning games over across multiple tournaments. And that's not to say if a good player has a bad tournament that they're bad, or that, there's people who have good tournaments that aren't the best player, but consistently like make a solid list and go play it well, and you're going to do well. I spend a lot of time humming and hawing over different aspects of lists, and I feel like almost every list I made, not every list, but a lot of the lists I made, I'm like, I could probably win with that. At the end of the day, if you put it on the table, I would make it work in some way. Or anybody, that's for anybody's list. Like, you just make it work. Like, there's little things you could probably change, but so this list was one that I created with the talking to some people and going back and forth, that I actually, like, when it was over and I looked at it, I was like, I really do like this list. I think there's one aspect of it which I'll go over that kind of annoys me, and this is and it's like it's like a little thing, um, but it takes playing a lot of Warriors games to kind of like see this kind of thing, or not see it, but just like it's not that obvious when I look at it. But so we'll start from top. Herald is the general. So now the Herald's the general, which is obviously good and bad. It's bad in the sense of if he dies, he's worth 1,000 points, but good in the sense that he usually stays alive longer than the fucking dragon does. Solid piece. A lot of flexibility in what you need to do, and very fast. It doesn't matter for the meta. I was a little worried about the meta kind of being bad for him, mainly being I think there's going to be well, there's already. I mean, the Scourge was super popular at social distancing. I don't know. Scourge and Chariots were all over the place. There are 7 Scourges. I think there's like 16 of those Chariots, those Threshing Chariots, Horde ones, and there's a ton of Blazing Glories. So I think that style of demons is going to be very popular in the Ocho. Um, and Bobo scored a lot of points on a very good team. He played a lot of good people too, and beat a lot of them. So I think they're going to be popular. With that being said, it was kind of a twofold thought process to me, where I was like, well, I do have to be able to handle a Scourge to some extent, right? Or at least be able to play with against the list. And on the other side, if people are going anti-Scourge, what's anti-Scourge and how does that affect my meta choices? And this is getting I didn't to be honest, I didn't think that hard about the meta and what's out there. I made a list that I thought was good as warriors and stuff like that. But if people start adding more div, that kind of directly affects the Exalted Herald, because div is pretty good against him. Now, one thing that's nice about warriors is nothing else in the list is div that good against, right? The only thing in this list that div is actually good against is the Herald's extremely good, pretty good. At least he comes with a 4-up armor. And the Elders, which have 3-up armor, so it's really Unerring Strike is the only one that's even good versus them. And I have a Binding Scroll, and so you can play versus div. You can hide the Herald. Like, there's things you can do to get around div in this list. But I do think that's going to be more popular to deal with the Scourge. But at the same time, if I want to deal with the Scourge, I think mobility is fairly important against a Scourge. If you're like a sitting duck in a unit, like you have a really big character in a unit that moves 4, say like a warrior, like if I had a Master Mage thing in a warrior block, there's a chance that I just can't get away from him. Also, spells like Hellfire and Grave Calls are very good versus a Scourge. Sorry, my cats are fighting. All right, let me get. All right, sorry, the cats were fighting. I had to separate them. So yeah, so dealing with the Scourge, having Grave Calls and Hellfire is really good. So they're both good spells. I mean, I think a nice Hellfire with reroll to wounds, depending on if the Scourge has armor, which most of them do, can just neuter a Scourge in one magic phase. Now, it's not the end-all be-all answer. I have other tools, maybe. It's not easy, but anyway, I think the Herald kind of has that flexibility in the magic phase, and if somebody corners up versus me, I have the option to take Comet and maybe throw a Comet in the corner or something. I mean, this army is pretty aggressive, period. So it has options, but at the end of the day, you want to get into matchups where it can go kill people. So Herald, I mean, there's no upgrades or anything to take. You just how you play him and the flexibility that comes with him. So then I have a Sorcerer on a Dark Chariot. So I basically moved my Wizard off of the Dark Chariot or the Dragon to a Chariot, and I've run this guy before, except I took Alchemy instead of Evo in my Masters list. Actually, no, it's not that close to my Masters list. It has some common threads to it actually, which we'll talk about. So the reason I'm trying Evo, I'm not 100% sold on it. Like the buffs are really good. Like reroll to hit, reroll to wound, and whispers all have very good synergies with my list. And being an MSU list, something like whispers can help a little more because if you hit it with 2 or 3 units, you whispers has more value. Reroll to wound is really good for impact hits and stomps, and you know other things, as opposed to if you think of so alchemy was the other choice, and if you think of alchemy, you're basically going for armor, which is really good in this army. To be fair, armor is probably the only reason I'd want alchemy, but it is pretty high to cast the other version, and it's not as good defensively in this list. It's okay, but you have so many targets that like I guess it's really good on the 18 the 18 greed warriors kind of makes me like really want alchemy, but at the same time I don't think it's a must. I mean, Evo has really good buffs. Reroll to wound is great on spike shields, and alchemy doesn't get you that. Like a glory of gold, okay, that's the spell. Glory of gold isn't as good with this list as I think. And I used to run a flying Portent Lord, so it was like that secondary of if I needed rerolls to wound on my Lord, I kind of had it in my back pocket plus a buff. So you armor something and then you get reroll wound on your Lord. It's like 2 for 1. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna try Evo. I don't think it's like game ending either way. It gives you a Veil token, which helps you out a little bit. Good buffs. Reroll to hit can be really good. Warriors just have very high value attacks. So like any chance you get to reroll hits or reroll ones to wound, like you're just doing a lot more damage. It's not like rerolling to wound with. I mean, I guess you can say strength. You're gonna reroll. Maybe you get less value if you reroll a strength 5 and you're rerolling ones because you might not rolling ones. But at the same time, it's just consistency from whiffing. Um, Buffing is just very strong in Warhammer. Like as much as you like, oh, I got killed by the comet, which is a really good spell, or the grave call is like buffing. I don't think people. I've seen people buffing wins games. Like win the fucking combat. And some people complain about like, oh, it shouldn't have gone that bad. I'm like, and there's times I do this too, where you make a charge and you're like, I'm 100. I'm gonna fuck him up average. I do 6 wounds. He only has 4. And then you whiff, and then you do the math, and you're like, well, it's like 30% chance for that to happen. Well, make it fucking 0% chance. Put a buff on yourself and get the rerolls. So anyway, the buffs are good. I mean, this magic phase is nothing special. It's some buffs, and depending on what you take on your herald, I think you're on your herald. You really have to decide of, am I going to go kill things and take spells like the Thaume, right? Thaumaturgy, and just have maybe a Hellfire, and then whatever your other one is, like Rot is really good on the herald. Actually, super good. And just say I'm going to fight anyway, because there's games where like you take like I'm going to take Pentagram, fucking Grave Call or like a Hellfire Grave Calls and something else, right? And you're like, I'm gonna cast all these spells, and then like turn 2 you're fighting, and you're like, you can't cast them, you're just killing things in combat, and you're like, well, I wish I had buffs now. But you have the flexibility for that. So I feel like part of me wishes I had armor, but I think Eva is gonna work just fine. So this character setup tonight, they're both fighty. He can hold his own. 4 strength 5. He's on a chariot. He's at 8-inch threat range. He kind of hangs back. He's not as fast as the rest of the army, but he can come in and support. 1-up save, reroll, break checks. Like he just holds things, and he's just annoying for 460. Also, I it's not really that I had a unit that I could put a mage on foot in, and we'll get to why. Like that's one of the I think the pivot points of this list potentially that I am not 100% about, but I want to try is, if he was on foot, this unit can't really do like the positioning of this unit matters more. The less unit you have to keep him safe. It's not as flexible to throw it away. So part of this the warriors back and forth is if you drop the herald for like a master mage, um, you have to put him somewhere, and then it's like, do you put him on a Diaz without, pay the 80 points for the Diaz, Alchemist, Alloy, and Plate Armor to give him the 1-up save, and then does he go in this unit? And then if he goes in the Greed unit, is he taking up too many spots because you don't, crap like that? Chariot guy, um, again, he could be vulnerable. Like, I don't love cannons with him, but the army in general doesn't love cannons, and like, there's like a list of like targets, right? With 2 elders, as you'll see at the bottom, a chosen chariot, a herald, and dark chariot. If you put a lot of options out there, they can only kill so much stuff. That's kind of like they can't kill everything. That's kind of how you have to think of it when you play lists like this. If you're scared of one cannon, you just what can you do? You can't do anything about it. Now maybe you don't want him to die, but I did take a binding scroll. I think it's I think in an aggressive list you need at least one or maybe two would be fine, but I think one is fine is also in this list. You want that turn where you're going in and their next turn and you're just like fuck you stone skin or fuck you heal. That's a big one where you've like binding scroll the attribute on the mock guy, the mock BSB. There's a lot of cool things to binding scroll. A big one is always like if they have evo and you're like I'm gonna binding scroll reroll the wounds so they can't get lethals. It's not as big with this list, but there are lists that have it. uh, you know, it's just binding scroll is just good. Or if you're a big one would be if you're playing against Div, right, and you're going all in, and they have like one turn, and because demons, I'm guessing would love a binding scroll, and you're just like, all right, no unerring strike this turn. I'm gonna stop the Fate's Judgment, and then okay, you have no other damage. It might have spears and stuff, but you got to just hope you can survive them, and then go in with the rest of your army. It depends on the army. I guess I was div in that example was demons. But if you're like just a div master, it can hurt so bad because they only have 2 buffs. You just div the better, or you just binding scroll the better one and try to dice the other one, and now they have no buffs. And then that's 2 turns of buffs. That thing buffs last for 2 rounds. So if you think the fight might go for 2 rounds, you're now in the lead in as far as like overwhelming power. So that's my character setup, simple and easy. Um, in Masters, this was Alchemy, and I had another character, a Flying Portent Lord, which I dropped. So I took this unit to Masters as well, except I have Zealot's Banner. So with the other core, it's 3 scoring and 2 chaff, and one of the scoring is kind of garbage. Um, it just felt bad because, think of what's going forward. I had the Dragon, the Herald, an Elder, and a Feldrake unit. That was the fastest things I had. Then I had kind of a second wave of 2 Lust Chariots, and then I had a bunch of core that kind of just sat around and like scored, right? It just felt like this weird mix of speed, but not enough speed to like make things happen. So I actually think taking big warrior units in general, whether it's not even big, 18 is not like, oh, it's big. 18 is big. It's a lot of points. Taking like these 15 plus to 20 man warrior units are very like people have trouble fucking dealing with them. And a lot of the times when the rest of the army is coming at you, like this unit felt so good when I put it in my list. I've only played like 2 games with it. I mean, I played with it at Masters, but now bringing it back, I was just like, this. It just feels so good because I hated that other core because it doesn't do anything. You just walk around and hope to score, and maybe you flank something or annoy somebody to death. But this unit is like legit. Like I'm going, and I took Banner Relentless, so it keeps up with my army. So turn one, you could be like, oh, 50. Like think of the last list. What was coming at you turn one? It was the Herald, the Dragon, the Feldrakes potentially, and one Elder. In this list, it's Herald, two Elders, a Knight unit, a Feldrak unit, and Warriors, and then behind it, and the technically Flares, and behind it is a Lust Chariot and a Sorcerer on a Chariot. So the only thing that's like dicking around weak is probably this Lust unit, and again, we'll talk about what could have changed in that particular sense. But that Lust unit is not bad on its own. It's a scoring unit. It's just annoying. You don't have to babysit it. You just do something with it. You just put it somewhere, maybe in a runes, and just be obnoxious because it actually is more fighty than people give it credit for. But this warrior unit, it just goes well with everything else. It's a steadfast unit. There's a lot of people in this game that have, they don't have a ton of ranks, and so this unit, you put it in front of somebody and they can't deal with it in the turn, and then you can be combo charger with it. It just feels nice to have like a steady block that like isn't going anywhere potentially. And I took greed. I think you do go hand weapons and shields a lot, and I could 100% see this unit being shields. I just don't know what else I get with the points. If it's like 3 points less if you take another mark, if like, or 4 points less if you take pride. So you're talking for maybe you get a dog unit in core if you were to drop it to non. And there are some good things about the dogs in core, but I don't know if it makes a big enough difference to the fact that like you can just go great weapons, right? Or you can just go paired weapons, or you can just go, if you take great weapons and you cast Ancestral Aid on yourself and you're like, I have 15 strength 6 with reroll to hit, just feels good. It's just the option, because I think there's times where because there's things like monsters that don't necessarily want to charge this unit because you run a big risk of just being killed. Like, yeah, sure, you kill 5 warriors and then like they just hit you back and kill you. So they can't be tar pitted as easily potentially. So I'm not saying, I don't think, with no character in them, I kind of like them without. I like them with greed, but I don't think it's a must or anything. I just like this unit, and I think the fact, and the 2 times I've used a Relentless company, because I had a Helmall before, so it's different. It just felt very good. It just felt very good to like walk up in front of somebody and then say deal with it. Because I guess part of it is you're in the action with your other things. It's not really about like blocking in front of people. It's just like you're essentially a turn ahead of where they would be. So you're making threats. So the same time that your elders and your herald and stuff are making threats to charge people, this unit's right there making those threats as well, and it really helps it. Lust warriors fill out the core. I already talked about them. Honestly, probably don't even need lust. It I think it was lust or musician in this case. I took lust just so I could flee. If musician's kind of annoying not to have, but you can get around it. You don't have anybody in it, so you just have to position it correctly and kind of walk it towards objectives. That's what it's really for. It's really to be an objective unit that you can't deal with it with like bow shots or like a spell or like a small fast cav unit. Like you have to commit to killing this unit, and it can kill a lot of things if is supported by other stuff. So it fills out core. Could have been dogs. We'll get to that. 3 Veldrax, pair weapon, musician. I've ran the 4-man unit. I've run a little bit of the bigger units. I'm not a huge fan of the big units. This is it's just a solid unit for 365 points. It's beefy, it's fast, strength 5 attacks, 12 wounds. I mean, scoring. It's just, it's a great scoring unit. It usually is one of the ones that kind of sits in. It just does what it does. It has options. We'll skip to the Warrior Knights before I do the Chosen Chariot. So the Warrior Knights are scoring as well. So this list has 4 scoring, 2 are fast, 1 is really beefy. So my Masters list had 6 Knights, 3 Feldrax, this unit, and then didn't have this, but it had a Helmall. So I got to move around a little more. But the rest of the list wasn't as fast as this unit list is. So I think scoring wise, this feels good. So it's this is 365, this is 335. I think it's better to go one of each than double up on either one. So one's good against alchemy, one's bad against alchemy, one has one up save and can hold units better. So like this pride unit, its main job is to kind of zone and hold things for the rest of the list. So, it can still kill things. It's 11 strength 6 on a charge. But with minimized leadership 9 if the champ's alive, and it can tank, it just holds things better. Like it can actually take a lot more charges than people give credit for. Um, it's not as big of a liability on terror, or if there's no panic for it, so it can sit on objectives as well as needed and kind of be that annoying, like it's just annoying. You'll never panic it. So I think it's a good complement to Feldrax. Um, just a good compliment to Feldrax. You can't expect much of it, but it usually holds stuff. Pride, obviously, you've seen me using it recently. I know Tonka used it way back in the day. It's 10 points. I mean, it's a 10-point upgrade that gives them 3d6 leadership, which, it's great for march checks. It's great for redirect checks is a huge one. Like not pursuing things. There's a lot of like checks where you're like, fuck, having a 3d6, the fact that you don't have a BSB in this list, and the fact that you get inherent reroll panics break checks, like there's a lot of dice rolls where having minimized is really important. And so that's why I went this instead of like Great Weapon Wrath, because I had enough strength 6 in the list to or high strength in the list to kind of say, I don't need it. Chosen Chariot of Lust, so I only have one Chosen Chariot this time. It actually feels very weird to only take one chariot as opposed to two, but it's all good. Let me just see a rule real quick. I actually don't know. Unfortunately, if I join the Lust Chariot with my Wizard, I don't get Feign Flight, but that's okay. I was just curious. So I took one chariot and it's going to be Lust. I think there was arguments for greed because I have like flares and stuff I have enough things to flee that I don't need to flee with my chariots as much. But I think the counter argument was, one, I could flee, and two, none of my list really wants to sit in like a runes or something, right? And so, or go into a rune because it just is deadly. Like I have a lot of expensive wounds that could die. And so there's some maps where like there's a runes in your deployment zone, and a chosen chariot is just perfect to sit in that and kind of zone. So like if you're doing like a sweeping a flank type move, or even just having a unit it's zoned so much space because a lot of units cannot take a charge from a chosen chariot or gets held up by a chosen chariot. So one thing a lot of people do, well, let's actually talk about that in a little bit. I just like a chosen chariot less. No random wounds from terrain. It can flee if it needs to. It kind of can operate on its own. It's not expensive. Support the rest of it. It's not as fast as the rest of the army, but that's okay because sometimes it's like a second wave, or if the Feldrax this guy's going up on his own, he can kind of control like the flank that they're not going up on, and kind of hold them off, almost like a cuts off like the part of the board. Just a solid piece. Um, 2 times Slayer, Skinning Lash, Shield. So I want some Lash Bros. So I put 2 Feldrake Elders in. I don't think we need to explain that anymore. Feldrake Elders are strong. I have to watch out for panic checks because I have 3 Feldrake units, and I don't want them to panic each other. So that's a thing you have to always worry about. But I think Feldrakes with Exalted Herald are pretty nice in general because he can give them minimized when you need it. You have to be kind of smart with that part, but they're just strong models, and it's an aggro army, and they're the fastest ones we got. And they're really good. Pyro doesn't. Think of all the things that fuck giants or other big monsters, and you just alchemy doesn't really do much to them. Pyro doesn't do much to them. Div is okay versus them. Uh, it's just they're really obnoxious. There's a lot of things, and they have hatred versus flying, which is kind of cute too. Good pieces. So So I would say the biggest pivot points on this list, if you were to maybe change something, might be these guys. So if you think about it, this could be 2 dog units. You'd have to add 1 warrior. This could be 2 dog units, and then you would drop these 2 and probably get like a knight unit. I think you only have points to get like a knight unit because you want the scoring. So you got to assume that I have a scoring and 2 chaff. So if you want to make the same trade, these become dogs and these become warrior or knights. So you become faster in general, but I think I like this one better because assuming that one of your scoring is going to have to potentially just do like not too much. I don't know if I need 2 knight units. I think the warriors can kind of cover that ground their own. If you're going to stay back and on a secure, if you're going to just walk across for a breakthrough or something like that. But I think having good chaff, there's something about having good chaff, right? So obviously a dog unit is only 50 points cheaper, 56 points cheaper. Yes, 56. So I would save 100. So basically, I'm downgrading some stuff for better chaff. So what do I get for it? I mean, that's the big question. What do you get for it? Because I guess when you think about it, if you assume even if these didn't have skinning lash and shield, they're 145. If you think of it that way, that's the kind of the weird part is they're not that much more expensive than 2 8-man dog units. It's the fact that it comes out of your special choice and you got to fill your core with something else. So if you depends on how much you value that warrior unit or say a knight unit or a chariot. It can't be a knight unit. It has to be a scoring unit in this case. I'm just assuming it has to be a scoring unit in my head. Clearly, it could be dogs and core, and this could turn into another chariot. But I'm assuming I want 4 scoring units. So yes, if these were dogs and this was like a chosen chariot, it'd be pretty good too. But I think it can run into scoring problems when you only have this and this. So anyway, so let's talk about the value of good chaff. So what do dogs bring over? What do flayers bring over dogs? And I think dogs are great. They're not going to convince me that 22-inch move core units don't have a good place in a warrior's army. So I'm not anti-dogs. Most of my lists have dogs in them. But where can I find the argument for flayers over dogs? So one being, um, they have reroll panic, they have Strider, and reroll panic's the big one, and Strider, and they don't need general's leadership. They're 8 on their own. In conjunction, what that does is you don't have to babysit them with your general. You can more reliably take terror checks. That's a huge one. Taking terror checks with dogs is scary as shit. It was even worse in my other list when I had only an 8 leadership general. Now you can mitigate a little bit by putting the attribute from your herald on dogs, and I've had to do that before. But it doesn't feel good because you have to be within 12 inches, and it just doesn't feel good. And it's not always like, well, you're gonna be a general, you're gonna be in 12 inches anyway. To be fair, um, but you don't need to do that in this list. So that's a big one. Just like the general, like you don't need to be the general near them. You have reroll panics. There's no like 2 die and you fail leadership 9. Um, that's a huge deal for chaff. You don't want to lose them early. They have a 4-up save versus no save. There's less of them. So in theory, this is only equivalent to 10 wounds in dogs. But being Strider, they can hide in terrain better. They don't have to. I mean, I've had dogs run through the water and fail panic, and just like, oh, you'd be shocked how many times. You probably wouldn't be shocked. You'd probably be like, oh, that makes sense. How many times you're just kind of sitting there with your dogs and you're like, all right, I got to march through something, and I have to put my general here, so that I have to take a leader, in case I have 2 die, and you could just ruin your whole plan. So the fact that they're Strider is great. Move 20 versus move 22. But I think it's basically the same because if you're going to wheel at all, which you're probably going to have to with dogs, move 20 and move 22 is basically the same. Though that you kind of lose the advantage of that move 20 if you fail a march check. And while these guys don't get reroll march checks, they're faster without it, and they're fast cav. I mean, that's a huge thing too, right? making lines and making weird angles is so much easier. Sometimes the dogs just stand in front. So I think from a movement, and they have Vanguard 6. So theoretically, if you're going to do it turn 1, they can go, if you're going first, they can move 6 and then move 20. So they have 26-inch movement with fast cav as opposed to 22 of the stick of a dog. So I think from the movement perspective, you're not going to get better than the flares. As I said, they already have a good armor save, which is pretty nice. And then Skidding Lash is this weird but good upgrade for 20 points. So it's 40 points I spend on it. But you think about it, people pay 30 points for the Dragon Breath, right? Whatever that spell, a little 2d6 strength 3. And so that averages 7 strength 3 hits, where, for 20 points a unit, you can get a minimum. The minimum, if you just run and chaff something and can get within an inch of it and then sweep it, you get 5 strength 4 attacks AP 0. For just do it once. If you do it once, it could almost be worth its points just to do some wounds. I mean, I think what else is kind of cute is it kind of gives you this weird threat to like chaff and like other people's chaff, and because 2 units doing it average killing like some chaff pieces are causing panics, or it does a cheeky wound to a giant or two. Um like to be fair, like there's a an ogre dog, right? It kind of has to be worried if it's not chaffing. Like you can't be within 20 inches because it's, I don't even know what the math is. I don't have my file up, but an average of 2.5. It's, you have to roll 2 4s on 5 dice to just kill a dog, and then they lose a chaff piece, and you didn't have to do anything with yours. So I think having lash is cute. It's actually pretty good versus manglers. You can kind of lash them. If you have both of them, you should be able to kill one, or you just land on them and say fuck it, just eat my unit. But I think the options are there, and sometimes you're just gonna walk up and be a screen and say fuck it. But I think reliable chaff in an army that's so aggressive is really nice. It also like things other rates. They're 5 strength 4 with reroll break check, so they can hold things a lot better than dogskin. Like you can charge them at something. I think people underestimate using chaff for this in general, but I think flares are especially a little better at it because they're strength 4 AP 0 base. They have reroll break checks inherently, so they don't need the BSB, and that's pretty much the two things. Is like charging something and holding it for next turn, right? If you charge 5 flares into the flank of like a ranked unit that's like strength 3, you're probably gonna do equal wounds. You probably actually do one more statistically than they do. So let's say you're up 1 on wounds. You charged and you flanked. They have 3 ranks in a banner. You're on a rerollable 7, rerollable 8 with your general, and they're held. Like maybe they kill you in their turn, but they can't go anywhere. So you can do that with dogs technically, but if you lose, you're not rerollable, and you have to have your general around, and they're easier to kill because these at least have a 4 save. And it's hard to get the dogs into position to flank, to be fair. These also hunt war machines. I think Vanguard, I think fast cab units with Vanguard, or any unit that's fast with Vanguard that can kind of take on little things, has the advantage of forcing the opponent to like, it gives you opportunities for mistakes, right? I'll say this: 8 dogs does what 8 dogs does. And I know I'm spending a lot of time on this kind of crap, but and again, not anti-dogs. I'm just talking my thought process through this list. 8 dogs does what 8 dogs. It moves up, it chaffs at some point with its 22 inches, and sometimes it dies, and that's it. This gives you options and like if the opponent makes a mistake and gives you your turn 1, and they put they give you a little gap in the lines, and you Vanguard 6 move 20, and all of a sudden you're between 2 units like looking at their war machines. That's an advantage, right? That's a huge thing. Dogs don't do that. Or they put their dog in the wrong place, and you walk up Vanguard, skinning lash the dog and kill a piece of chaff turn 1. Or they put their 5 orc fast cav outside of their general range, and you sweeping lash it, and they fail their panic and they run off the board, right? Like these are real situations. These are not weird things to happen, but they force it. And I think in Warhammer, and one reason I like to play a little bit more aggressive, and I like the Helm Wall as well, if you force your opponent to think, the more options you have, the more they can get wrong, right? This list has a lot of options. Very good here. This can hold things. This can take different manifestations so you don't know what's always coming. This has different weapon options to, handle different situations. You're not stuck with like I can't kill toughness 6 because I'm fucking, that that's what this list has. It's like a lot of options in one thing, a lot of plays. So, what is the obvious, well, it's not obvious. What is the thing that kind of like is annoying with this list? I'll say I you take a lot. There's 2 or 3 spells. Well, there's grave calls, the breath weapon, and rot, which require sacrificing a unit. And usually, I kill 2 dogs or 2 barbarians, and this list doesn't have as many units to kill. I guess in theory, you could just kill a flare. And while that doesn't feel good, really, I guess because it only feels bad because you're losing a skinning lash. But honestly, skinning lash is like an icing on the cake, and usually, um, it's worth it because like the dog is the reason you do it is because 8 chaff just as well as 6 usually, or 6 just as well as 8. So I guess it's really not a big deal. Um, though late game you could just be in a situation where you're like I gotta kill a relentless warrior, but you do what you gotta do. That's the only thing that feels bad actually. As I say that, it sounds a lot more stupid than I thought. It is annoying. Shrug. But at the same time, if you're killing barbarians with it, you're not using those points. Like it's 135. Like that's kind of an interesting way to think about it. Now, barbarians, 15 barbarians are scoring, and they have other uses. So I'm not gonna. But it's an interesting perspective of if you say I paid 34 points for that warrior, I don't want it to die. At the same time, if you're killing 2 barbarians that aren't doing anything and they're just sitting there being dicks, you've basically already spent 135 points to do nothing. So, you know, that's no different than losing a warrior in that case. So that's an interesting perspective on it as far as that. But anyway, that's my list. You can see it on the table here in UB. Nothing. It kind of looks weird without terrain, but let's load a map. Let's just pick a map. If you've made it this far, um, thanks for staying. Let's find these maps. I like to do Ben Mitchell's maps. We'll just pick a frontline map. This looks good. Right. Lock it. So let's just say this is your frontline map. I was gonna make a like really aggressive looking like red, white, and blue army on UB. So he's red, white, and blue because USA. But let's just say that um yeah, let's just say it looked really actually I can show you guys since you're here. These are my armies. I actually do enjoy making models. This is my UB dice symbol if you guys ever want it. One day I'm gonna play ogres, I think. So I'm making some ogre models. I actually, like I said, I enjoy making UB models. So this is this is something I started and then I stopped. After I made a couple units, I realized that looks really fucking obnoxious on the board, and it's even worse when it's paired up with like this. Like it just looks stupid. I just for my like it's one thing to annoy other people. I'm okay with that, as you see by some of my real life armies. But to annoy myself when I'm playing is probably too much. I do like this Demon Prince a lot, though. I'm also considerate enough, unlike some people, to have 2 Demon Prince models. So when I take Fly, I have this guy, and when I don't take Fly, I have this guy. Come on, guys, have some UB etiquette. We've been on UB for a long time now. Also, save your fucking army. Have your spells out. It's not that hard. Save it in a slot. You know, I have magic cards. I deleted them for this video. So, like, if you're looking at a map like this, right? I actually played on this map the other day, and this is not how I. This is kind of how you can play it, but depending on the scenario, like you might say, I'm gonna, heavily go to the left side. This is like a perfect spot for like a chosen chariot, in my opinion. Like like you're just chilling. I mean, it all depends on the enemy army. But let's just say you're chilling here, man. I mean, you are projecting a lot of, well, you probably wouldn't look that way. You probably look like that or something, but you're projecting a ton of threat, all over the place over here. Oh, I'm clicking the wrong thing. What's this one? Oh, this gives you the draw, right? Yeah. Like you look at this threat range. And so if the rest of your army is doing its thing over here, right? Whatever you're doing. I don't know how I would deploy this, but maybe you're going on the hill or something. And maybe it's not just um, this doing it. All right, sorry. All right, the wife walked in. I had to pause it. So yeah, it's like a zoning threat. You don't have it's beefy enough that people can't just walk at it. I mean, yeah, it's slow, and you maybe don't need. And sometimes you'll walk up with your own unit. If it was like maybe this map, maybe if you depending on how much you press. If you're pressing with your army, and it's like I'm making up how I'm pressing, but you know he sits on this hill, and now he zones and helps that he can easily come in and help. So I think having one chariot is fine. And this chariot does the same thing. It's not probably a zoner. This is probably the one that comes up and helps. But even if it was like a spoils marker here, and you went like this, and you said and maybe you committed to saying I'm going to take the middle one with this big unit, and then I'll fight over this one with like I said, I'm making up deployments. I have zero idea what I would do in this. You know, this is like a legit defensive spoils. You say, all right, you want the chariot or you want this unit? Like this unit can take it. This unit will help support him. So I think having this one chariot, is good. I think one thing people do a lot that's kind of odd in games is there's so much difference. So somebody, Thomas told me about this actually. You know, when you're playing against someone with, let's say somebody had I have two elders, right? And this isn't always the case, but let's say you have two elders, and let's say the enemy has one freedom elder, right? On paper, you might say to yourself, and this is super generalized, so don't take this for like anything more than an example, right? If they have two and you have one, on paper this looks really bad for you because like, man, they have two elders, they can kill my one. But in practice, when you play, this guy over here doesn't want any of his elders getting charged by your elder, potentially, because you're probably going to just win and break them. You have the advantage of charging, you get magic. It's a very generalized statement. With that being said, you're essentially zoning these elders with your one elder. So what I don't get is when people like will just do something like this, right? And they don't put anything over here. I hate that. It's like you don't put anything here. Make them deal with it, right? Make them in like breakthrough, right? If you put this unit here, it may die, it may not make it. They have to do something about it, right? And people do this a lot against demons, I think, or something, where people put like the sticks of hoarders or something, and they just let them walk up, or I think ogres do it well too with like 10, 20 man scrappling units, right? Whether they're sitting on an objective or their army's fighting on this side, and they just put like a little scrapping unit like right here in breakthrough, and it's like something has to go here and stop it, or it's going to make it up. So things like that's what this chariot can do. This chariot kind of is like that, right? There's a lot of units that can't take it. Yes, 3 units combined can take this unit, but if it's sitting here, you know, it could be the difference between somebody walking an elder up to here turn 1 and saying, "Oh, I can see everything." And them saying, "Fuck that. I'm not going to get charged by it. I have to sit, here." And as long as you're doing work otherwise, it kind of just sits there and does its job. Um, Again, not a perfect. A lot of units can do this. This is more of a strategy thing than a less cherry thing. But the fact that it can sit here, if it was on the top side, it could sit in the woods. It can sit behind the wall. and just be like -2 to shoot and say, fuck it, I'm not going to take 2 wounds when I go over the wall. I can flee, if it's sitting here and somebody really and that's the kind of thing. If it is doing this job and they're like this, right? They put an elder here. And let's say you want to try, you can say, oh, I'm going to go for this 10-inch charge. If you fail, you go like here, and then if it charges you, you just flee, and then you kind of stopped it for a turn, and then you rally and put yourself here, and you're kind of in the same position you were before of zoning. So I think what I've learned with like this warrior style and warriors in general and single model stuff is really like planning stuff like that, making sure units can charge past each other. Flares are also really good. Dogs can do this too, but flares are also really good for combo charging and like setting up good fleas. So like, you know, example might be you're facing this unit. This actually happens a lot more than you think, but you're like, I'm gonna try this. I'm just trying to make an example. Is this actually gonna work? This might not be the best example, but it's oh my god, Freedom Drake, get out of here. I hate when it does this. Let's just say this, right? This is your situation. They can flee, but let's just say they can't. They won't. You could do something like there's a difference between this, right, and this. Because if you do this, and maybe you can say, okay, you can hit me. You can go here, right? You can now, when you break this, assuming you do, it's not guaranteed in this particular instance, you can pursue this way, and then this guy can hit here. You can do this with anything, but like these little chariots and these little pieces, it's something that comes up a lot playing this type of style, I found, and forcing like redirects and or overruns different directions is really nice. So I do think these are going to give me a lot of fun options. It feels weird paying 100 more points in my core, in my special, to get better chaff, but they do offer a lot of options. So yeah, that's my list. Is it perfect? Not really. Could it work? I think it'll work. I think it'll be pretty good. Pretty excited about it. It's one of the few lists I've made in the last couple days where I legitly look at it and say, I feel like I'm going to have fun, and I feel like I have the tools I need to deal with a lot of people and potentially score a lot of points. It's funny, there's a lot of games where this army kind of goes at you, and it can fail, but it feels like it doesn't fail as hard as some armies do in the aggro phase. Like, it feels like when it fails, you're still like, well, I killed a lot. I'm still warriors. As long as I don't lose, if I don't, my herald doesn't die, that's a lot of points. Good chance I'm winning the objective because a lot of people don't kill that greed unit. Where you're just like you come out of a bloody game and you still won like 12, and you're like, oh, that's not so bad. And there's moments where you're like, it's funny. There's moments both ways. There's a lot of moments where you're like, oh my god, I'm lucky to survive. But there's also a lot of moments where you're like, man, I was like super close to getting a 20. I felt that way in the tournament. I felt I felt I did have very nice moments that helped me, so I'm not complaining about dice, but there were definitely some turns where I was like, I am like a die roll away from like 20ing you, and it just doesn't happen. Um, but you got to set yourself up for those positions. I could have definitely done some of them better. Not going to deny that. But yeah, that's my OCHO list. 6 games. We'll see how it does. Pairings are a big deal. That's the last. Everyone knows that, right? There's lists that are just gonna be like, would fuck this, but this list is designed with pairings in mind that I shouldn't be sacrificing myself to a horrible matchup. It should be one of the armies on the team that tries to get good matchups and go get points. I also like to be the one that tries to get points. I think a Hellmaul style is great to be like a more all-comer type list. Um, but I didn't feel like being that role. So yeah. Well, I'll have list reviews on probably the Warriors list, maybe some of the top teams as we go on. I'm going to try to do more commentary this event in general. So hopefully you guys hear more from me, and thanks for listening.